This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
How would you like to get more customers, make more profits, and have bigger breakthroughs? Get Doberman Dan's profit-boosting breakthroughs. Normally, this would cost you $98 per month, but right now, for listening to this show, he's giving you a free copy of his Doberman Dan letter. All you have to do is go to DobermanDan.com and sign up to get your free copy now.
Prepare yourself for the uncensored, nothing held back, no BS reality of how business and life really work. Doberman Dan is off the chain.
I'm excited about our guest today, Jonathan.
You say that about all the guests.
Well, it's because we always have kick-ass guests.
I always say that because every time I go on a show, guys, someone will say, "Oh, this is a very special guest today." It's like, well, what did you have last time? Like a really crappy guest, you know?
Yeah, right.
right. Or on the other hand, it's like, well, gee, if everybody's special, then nobody's special.
Right.
It's
like when everything is breaking news on CNN or ESPN, nothing is breaking news. Like somebody signed a contract. It's not breaking news, guys. Get back to like breaking news.
News is
so
broken.
True. You're listening to Craig Ballantyne, ladies and gentlemen. Craig is somebody that I've been following a long time, at least since. When did you take over Early to Rise? What year was that?
Well, that was 2011, but we've been connected for many, many years before that in the fitness space.
That's right. That was our original connection because of the fitness space. Now, that probably goes back to the 90s, right?
I would say early 2000s.
Okay. Well, woulda, shoulda, coulda. I mean, we've known of each other for a long time. You've been somebody that I've wanted to reach out to and strike up a friendship with for a long time. And all of a sudden, at the end of a 3-day event in Cleveland, Ohio last year, we both stand up to stretch and realize we have been sitting next to each other for 3 days. And we're like, dude, we should like get together. So here we are. We've gotten together.
Yeah, that was quite the introduction. And it was just like, I'm like, who is this guy with this beautiful girl beside me? All along, you know? It's like, oh. And then he gets up on stage and he got grilled by Kennedy. And that was a really good session. I got a lot out of that. And it wasn't in Cleveland. It was in beautiful Independence, Ohio. And I always make sure to differentiate because that is a place to really make clear that you're not in Cleveland.
Yes, I'm so glad you clarified that. Yeah, exactly. And the timing of the event was so perfect. Dan Kennedy timed it for the 2 days out of the year in that area that has sunshine. So it was just a miracle.
Yes, it was great. It was really great. I mean, it was Kennedy's best event that I've been to in a long time because I go to all those annual trainings, and that one was, I mean, usually I sit there and I can mouth the words of the stories because I've heard them so many times. But this time he really went deep, dark into his trunk and brought out stuff that I hadn't heard before, and some very valuable stuff. And it was very related to copy and persuasion, and it was really helpful. And it was the best one that he had done since I went to something called Mailbox Millions a few years ago.
I agree. I was at that one too. And then the event that you're talking about, the one we were at fairly recently, was called Mind Hijacking.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was a great event. You and I have been around this world for a while now. So
very much so. And I think it might have been Tom Venuto who introduced us years ago, back when I hired Tom as my coach.
Your backstory is fill me in on the backstory, because you and I both come from the fitness world, but tell me the whole story of how you wound up getting into online marketing.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so unlike you, I was not a copper, but I was a college student back in the late 90s. And so believe it or not, and you actually will because you're from up north, I wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach in the National Hockey League. That was my goal in life when I was like 18 years old, because it was kind of becoming something that was common among all teams. And so that was my thing. I wanted to be in the NHL. I couldn't play in the NHL because I wasn't good enough, but I wanted to find a way to be there. And so I went to school and got a master's degree in exercise physiology. And then 2000, I kind of had a big lucky break where I found the editor's email address for Men's Health magazine, and I wrote some articles and I sent them over to him. In fact, and you will laugh at me for this because it is so sad and pathetic looking back on it, but I was sending out an email newsletter in 1999 to people who had just, got referred to me. I didn't have a website. They weren't signing up anywhere. And I was sending it out by Hotmail. And I had eventually I had 3,000 people on my email list, and you could only send an email to 50 people at a time.
Ooh,
do the math.
I remember those days. Yeah.
It took me over an hour to send the email out to my list, literally manually over an hour, just sitting there copying and pasting. I remember I had a Word document with groups of email addresses, 50 people per group, and I would send these things out. So I had no idea what I was doing in 1999 through early 2001 even. But I started writing for Men's Health in 2000. I started doing some stuff for their forum, online forum in 2000. 2001, people started contacting me and saying, hey, through the forum and saying, hey, do you got a program that you can sell me? And that's when I started selling stuff through PayPal. That's when I created my turbulence training program, and I started selling that. And for the next 5 years, I just grew my business slowly. And then I hired a coach in 2006, Tom Venuto, and he really helped me exponentially increase my business. And so I think if we weren't connected before then, that's when you and I got connected, Dan, because he was helping me with a big launch.
I still have my bodybuilding supplement business back then. So I know we worked on affiliate stuff together. So
yeah, exactly. So that's what it was with that. And it was really, really good. And so, you were in that world for a while, and then I guess I kind of lost track with you. And I guess you kind of switched over to something else.
Well, yeah, typical of me, typical of most entrepreneurs. The grass is greener, man. I mean, here's what Gary Halbert told me once. And at the time it was funny. And now that I'm older, I totally get it. He said, I can't tell you what I want, but I can tell you exactly what I don't want. And that's whatever I have right now. And so I was going through that in the bodybuilding and fitness world, like, everybody else's business is better than mine. So I actually started the mental transition away from that in maybe like 2009, and then just kind of let it go on autopilot, and I just sold the business in 2012. So that's what happened to me. I was tempted by the greener grass. By the way, if you care to know, Craig, the grass is not greener.
Well, I know that because, in a way I know it, but in a way I really wanted to get out of the fitness world. Even when I started in the fitness world, I never wanted to be a personal trainer, but I did that for years in the early 2000s. What I really wanted to do is I wanted to run a business like Early to Rise, which we talked about, and I discovered in 2001. And now I do own it, which is a long story and a really great story. But I wanted to help people more than just with fitness. I didn't want to just tell them what exercises to do. I wanted to help them become wealthy and all that sort of stuff. And then so I was trying to get out of it for the longest time. And I started my own coaching program for entrepreneurs in 2007. And I really do love that. And the grass is greener in that area. But the fitness world, the financial grass was just so much greener for so long because I had such credibility and reputation, and we had good copy there, and we helped out a lot of people. So I wasn't able to get out of it until about last year, really. And it took me a long time because it just kept on sucking me back in because I found it so easy. I was able to help people like in 30 minutes a day, just writing emails or filming videos. And so it was hard for me to extract myself from that business. But now I've decided to go full on into helping people with the Perfect Day Formula, which is my new book, and the workshops that I do and the courses that I've created, and the Perfect Day Formula kit, which you have, that orange box of goodies that helps people dial in their day, get rid of the mental clutter in their head, and really get focused in on their big vision, whether or not they want to go to somewhere where they think the grass is greener or make the grass greener where they are right now.
Ooh, I like the sound of that. Well, I've always liked the sound of grass is greener on the other side, but nowadays I'm liking the sound of make the grass greener where you already are, which, by the way, I'm on my desk right now. I'm looking right at this big orange box, the Perfect Day Formula. What is the Perfect Day Formula if you were to sum it up?
It is basically my life's work in a box. And I started working on this in 2006 when I had these crippling anxiety attacks that sent me to the emergency room. And ironically, I had them at the same time as when I was getting coaching from Tom Venuto. So I was actually going into my coaching calls with Tom, that they were on the phone, and I was sitting there thinking, don't freak out, don't freak out, don't freak out. Right before I would go on the call with him, like that's what I was saying to myself or in my head. And I really thought that someday I might have to end the call with Tom and said, hey, Tom, I got to go and run outside and get some fresh air because the anxiety attacks were so bad. And so it was then that I realized I needed more structure in my life because I was suffering from what I called the paradox of freedom. And we have all seen in the news in the last few months how Johnny Depp has suffered from the paradox of freedom, which means he had nobody standing around saying, you know, you can't spend 7 figures to shoot Hunter Thompson's ashes into space. And so when you don't have structure in your life and you don't have somebody telling you not to do that, you go and spend that money and you go almost bankrupt and you go almost crazy like Johnny Depp did. Or if you're like me, who's just getting started, you end up being able to quit your job as a personal trainer. And then you have all the freedom in the world to work every single waking hour of the day, but also go out chasing girls in the big city of Toronto every single waking hour of the night. And the next thing you know, you end up with anxiety because you have too much freedom in your life. And so I started building structure into place, and that's what gave me true freedom in my life. And then I started coaching other people on this, other entrepreneurs who, again, want to get rid of the mental clutter in their head and develop complete mental clarity so that, again, they can make the grass greener where they are right now, both personally and professionally. It's not just about business.
So the anxiety issues, this wasn't something that you had dealt with all your life. This was a direct result of all the changes, the career changes and the paradox of freedom, or has it always been an issue?
I wouldn't say that it was ever an issue like that, for sure. You know, I've always been a type A kind of wound up person, very like, I got to get to the airport 2.5 hours before my, flight. I got to be the first person in line. Yes, I'm that person who lines up the first person at the airport. So, if somebody wants to kick me in the back of the legs when they see me, it's fair. I deserve it. But I just can't stop it as hard as I work to get rid of it. And so I've always been that way. But it wasn't until 2006 when it was a combination of just too much work, too much partying that a lot of young men go through who think they're invincible, and realizing that they can't do that. And so that caught up to me. And it wasn't just like I was stressed out at the end of the day. I actually went to the emergency room twice, walked in and said, I think I'm having a heart attack. So Doberman Dan, if you ever are going to the emergency room with a sprained ankle and you want to get to the front of the line, you just say that you're having a heart attack, because they take you right to the back right away. They take it very seriously. I remember the first time I walked in and did that, the guy was looking at me. I was walking up to the desk. Like, he was looking at me with like a mixture of disgust and like, what is this young man doing here? And then when I said it, his expression completely changed, and he just went from like, can you just leave me alone, to like, hey, I better help you out. So that was an interesting experience. And so I started doing all of this stuff. I did yoga, meditation, qigong, all of these things that I didn't like, but I did them in order to overcome the anxiety. I learned how to breathe properly, which sounds really stupid, but most people don't know how to breathe properly. And you can really fix your stress in about 2 minutes of breathing properly, breathing slow in through your nose, filling up your belly, big classic Buddha breath, and then slow out through your mouth. And if you do that 6 times in a minute, 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out, you will feel the weight of the world on your shoulders really decrease. It makes a huge difference. But I had to learn how to do that because I was breathing from my upper chest. And when you do that, you actually increase your adrenaline in your body and make your anxiety worse. So that was one thing I had to change. I learned that. And then I did all these other things. I even went and bought a dog, and the dog gave me more anxiety. And I realized I bought the dog version of me. And then eventually, because I bought the dog because you're supposed to pet a dog and your anxiety would go away. Didn't actually work out that way. It actually caused me more anxiety to have a puppy and leave him alone in my apartment, where he would cry all day because I wasn't around. And then I'd have all these nasty notes from my neighbors on the door.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So, but eventually, now he's the greatest thing in the world, 11 years old and still kicking around like a champ, and just wonderful. But after 6 weeks, I got through the anxiety, and that's when I started building the structure into my life, getting more dialed in with what time I should get up in the morning, because I was getting up every day and checking my email, and I was getting up later than I should. So I always felt like, oh, I'm behind. And so that caused me anxiety from the get-go. And then checking my email while in bed, I mean, that was the stupidest thing in the world. So that just doubled my anxiety. And I just started realizing, okay, you can't live like this anymore. And I fixed all those things. And now I help other people fix all of their flaws in their formula that allowed them to have really great days and have big, massive breakthroughs in their personal and professional lives.
So this wasn't, initially at least, this wasn't a productivity thing. This wasn't about, hey, I want to get more done in less time. This was about, if I don't fix this, I think I'm going to die.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I thought when you have anxiety, you have no idea what's going on. It's like this black box. You can't explain it to somebody else and you can't explain it to yourself. And so you're very confused and very frustrated and like freaking out. And every time I tell this to, an audience of 100, I'll get 10 people after who say like, yeah, I had an anxiety in the airport one time and they had to call the EMS, or, I had to go to the hospital. And it's like people who are big name people who have had this stuff. So a lot of people have suffered with this. And so they might know what I'm saying. But yeah, for me, I just wanted to fix myself first because you couldn't think clearly on anything. I mean, I could still go and exercise, but I was, always like, I can't exercise too hard. I think I might have a heart attack. Or you can't really work with full attention because, you have this. I felt like I was having a heart attack for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 weeks straight. You just can't think straight at that point. Eventually, I realized that, yeah, this does allow me to get a lot more work done in less time with more focus. And, it's like a bit of Cal Newport's deep work. It's about getting rid of all the distractions and doing what really matters and eliminating what doesn't. The classic Warren Buffett, take your top 25 things you want to do, delete the bottom 20 and never think about them again. And so most people just have too much opportunity, too many things going through their mind, and they don't know where to start. And so the system really adds the structure they need so that they do that. They do get more done, but really they have control of their life again.
This is a huge problem. This is a really common problem with entrepreneurs. But you don't work just exclusively with entrepreneurs, do you? I mean, do you find this in high performers in all different fields?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So lawyers, doctors, authors, thought leaders, whatever you want to call them, even high performance athletes. So, we get 5 people and we sit there and we go through and we just extract the mental clutter from their head. And so I try and make sure that the group has some similar interests. So usually I might do 5 gym owners, or I might have 5 female entrepreneurs, or 5 high performers one way or another. And anybody who's got family or who has personal life or of some kind, or has personal interests and doesn't have time for them anymore, because they're working all the time, because, there's 19 different social medias they think they need to be on. I mean, there's just all that clutter that gets in their head, whether they're a CEO or whether they're an entrepreneur or whether they're someone who wants to write another book. There's just so much competition for our time these days that they just don't know where to start. And I just, I slowly release that stress from them so that they can relax a bit and go, you know what? If I go and make an Instagram video today, it doesn't really matter compared to if I go and write 10 pages for my book. So I just need to, mentally prepare myself and schedule in my structure in my day so that I'm working in what I call magic time to be more successful in life. And so, for example, The Rock, one of my friends sent me an Instagram post from The Rock today. And it's The Rock getting up at 3:15 in the morning and saying, I have to get up at this time of day because once 5 o'clock hits and everybody else is up and I have to leave the house, I don't get anything done. And so he is structuring his day just like I do. I get up very early in the morning, and you don't have to. This isn't about getting up early in the morning. It's not about the hour you get up. It's about what you do with the hours that you are up. But sometimes you have to go to extremes in order to block off the time for you to focus on what matters. Some people, I have friends who are night owls and they're able to have the discipline to work at night. Most people aren't disciplined enough to work at night. It's actually easier on their discipline to work in the morning before the distractions come, because most people, at the end of the day, they're tired and they want to watch TV. And so if they say they're going, oh yeah, I'll write my 10 pages tonight before I go to bed, never happens. So really, most people are best off being served by having more control over their mornings, focusing on what matters, getting ahead. And it doesn't matter what area of life somebody's in, if they want to be a high performer, they need these systems.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm working on an article right now that I'm going to do probably a crappy job of articulating it today, which is why I want to write it as an article. I can take my time and say it like I want to say it and obsess over word choices, unlike I do on the podcast. But I'm utterly amazed still to this day. I am completely and utterly amazed at how everybody in the world thinks their agenda takes priority over mine, and how much I have to fight daily, hourly, by the minute to be able to stick to what I need to stick to complete my agenda, because it's like these monsters come out of nowhere, or even those closest to you turn into a monster that their sole intent is to impose their agenda upon you. Now, all of a sudden, their agenda forget your agenda. It's going out the window. My agenda takes priority. And it sounds like what you just described with a rocks post and what you've done with the perfect day formula. You've figured out ways we can't avoid that, obviously, but you've figured out ways to work around it and still get your stuff done.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's two levels of expectations. One is the expectations of others. So you and I are fans of Dan Kennedy, and he has clearly communicated the expectations people will have of communicating with him. He does not have email. He does not have a cell phone. So you can't communicate with him that way. He's setting up boundaries in place. I mean, he's a very weak person as well. So, I mean, he told this one story on one of his calls about how he will, have an alternate driving route to get somewhere. Like, let's say he has to go to the bank, and on the way to the bank, there's a donut shop. Well, he'll drive out of his way to not pass a donut shop, because he knows if he passes a donut shop and he's at all hungry, he's going to go into the donut shop, and he's diabetic, and that's obviously bad news. So he's just circumventing the distractions. And that is what everybody needs to do. And they need to set it up so that people have the expectation that you are unavailable for a certain time of day when you are going to go and get your work done. But then you also have to set up the internal mental expectations within yourself. And you have to structure your day so that you keep off social media. You have to structure your day so that, when you're most energetic and creative, you're working on energetic and creative tasks. And you're not doing busy work and then trying to do energetic and creative tasks at another time of day when you're going to be less productive at it. And so it's just a matter of a lot of self-reflection and introspection, Dan, which a lot of people don't do these days.
Oh, man, I know you were just getting into that, but as you know, we have a schedule to keep here at the Podcast Factory. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come back with part 2 of Craig Ballantyne and Doberman Dan next week. So make sure you come back and tune in. If you haven't already, subscribe to the show so you do not miss an episode. And thank you for tuning in to Off the Chain. Thanks for listening. And remember, if you want to create rivers of revenue from your existing customers, then the next thing you need to do is go to DobermanDan.com. He's giving away a free copy of his $98 per month Doberman Dan letter just for listening to the show. Go to DobermanDan.com now and sign up for your free issue.
This is the podcastfactory.com.